A man sits on the dirt floor of a rented room, the winter wind rattling the wooden shutters. That makes it easy to find a scroll on a shelf. But it destroys the narrative arc of a human life. When you read them that way, the local pagan mystics loved this word. They used pleroma to describe a vast, complicated ladder of angelic beings you had to climb to reach God. Paul steals their vocabulary. He weaponizes their own password. That stolen word changes everything. He takes the pleroma and pins it exclusively to the crucified carpenter from Nazareth. You do not need a ladder. You do not need angels. You have the totality of the divine standing right in front of you. Colossians is not a defense against a local cult. It is a declaration of absolute supremacy. The runaway slave, carrying these letters, steps out into the blinding Mediterranean sun. He walks back toward his master, holding papers that will outlast the empire that enslaved him. But Paul has one more scroll, sitting on the desk, and it is about to redefine how we see the unseen world. We often read the book of Ephesians as a quiet spiritual meditation because it lacks the frantic, targeted crisis of Galatians or Corinthians. Modern readers tend to treat it like a theological encyclopedia. But when you place it in its actual historical context, written from the confines of Roman house arrest, the text transforms from a polite essay into an act of breathtaking spiritual defiance. Paul is chained to a soldier. You are reading a man out of order. You are watching a movie with the scenes shuffled. You get the theology, but you lose the blood. He listens to the heavy thud of Praetorian boots echoing on the stone floor outside his door every hour of the day. Yet, when he writes Ephesians, he does not look at the walls. He looks past the guards, past the emperor, and straight into the heavenlies. He maps out a cosmic temple being built not out of marble, but out of fractured, hostile human beings. He takes the armor of the soldier, chained next to him, the belt, the breastplate, the heavy shield, and turns it into a metaphor for spiritual survival. Around the same time, another letter leaves that Roman prison. We call it Philippians. The church in Philippi is a community of retired Roman soldiers and struggling merchants. They are not wealthy, but they have scraped together a financial gift to keep Paul from starving in his cell. He writes back to say thank you. And the theme that dominates this letter, overflowing from almost every chapter, is joy. But this is not a naive, circumstantial happiness. It is a defiant gladness forged on the anvil of suffering. To explain this joy, Paul has to explain what he has lost. In Philippians chapter 3, verse 8, he reflects on his old life. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees, a brilliant scholar, a man holding the perfect religious pedigree. And he writes, the sweat and the sheer panic of a church trying to survive its first 3 decades. Because if you reorder these 13 letters into the exact timeline, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish. The word our English Bibles translate as rubbish is the Greek skubalon. It appears only this one time in the entire New Testament, and the English translation is far too polite. Skubalon does not mean ordinary trash or household dust. In the ancient world, it referred to the filth swept off the street, or the raw excrement left in an animal stall, or the rotting scraps tossed to the wild dogs. That root changes the entire weight of his argument. When Paul looks back at his prestigious resume, his theological degrees, and his spotless moral record, he does not see a collection of good things he bravely left behind. He sees skubalon. His religious pedigree was not a badge of honor he politely laid aside. It was toxic waste. He is not saying his past achievements were merely insufficient. He is saying they were fundamentally repulsive compared to the sheer oxygen of knowing Christ. He finds joy in chains because the things the empire values most are things he has already discarded as filth. He is completely free. Eventually, this period of house arrest comes to an end. Paul is released, and he begins to travel again. They were actually written. You start to see something the traditional reading completely misses. You watch a brash, Aggressive church planters slowly soften into, but the church he walks back into has fundamentally changed. And the final letters he writes will not be addressed to churches at all. They will be addressed to the men who have to hold the line when he is gone. Paul is free. The chains are off. He walks out of Rome and into the blinding Aegean sun. But the empire is shifting. The smell of smoke from Nero's Rome is drifting across the Mediterranean. The cultural pressure on the young church is escalating from quiet suspicion to open slaughter. And Paul knows his own clock is winding down. If you have ever built something with your own hands, you know the absolute terror of handing it over. If you are leading a family, managing a business, or guiding a ministry you recognize, this exact pivot, it is the moment you realize your success is no longer about what you can accomplish. It is entirely about who you can prepare. If you are in a season of succession, you understand exactly why the tone of his letters suddenly changes. He stops writing to crowds. He starts writing to sons. He writes to Timothy, a timid young pastor left to manage the chaos of Ephesus. He writes to Titus, left behind on the rugged, rocky island of Crete. We call them the pastoral epistles, but they are not church growth manuals. They are survival guides, a chained, reflective spiritual father. You see, theology forged not in a quiet study, but in the streets, in shipwrecks, in the shadows of executioners. Paul is stripping the church down to the studs. He gives Timothy blueprints. He gives Titus qualifications. He tells them how to spot a wolf in sheep's clothing. He tells them how to care for the elderly, widows freezing in the winter. He tells them to guard the deposit of truth with their lives. Look at the cadence of these letters. You can feel the anxiety of succession. You can hear the urgency of a father running out of breath. He tells Timothy to stop drinking only water and take some wine for his sick stomach. He is dealing with a stressed, ulcer-ridden, overwhelmed young man. He is asking a kid to stand up to intellectual giants and fierce false teachers. Leadership is not a platform you climb. It is a heavy, dangerous coat you wear. Paul is forcing Timothy and Titus to put the coat on. He is establishing order, because order is the only thing that will keep the ship from capsizing in the bloody storm that is about to hit. He knows that without character-tested men at the helm, the churches he bled to plant will dissolve into the pagan chaos around them. He gives them everything he has. He empties the tank, because the window of freedom is closing fast. The Roman authorities are hunting again, and the next time Paul asks a guard for a piece of parchment, he will not be planning a missionary journey. He will be planning to die. These letters are not a textbook. They are a real-time crisis intervention. To feel the weight of this story, you have to read them. The cold is settling deep into his bones. The Mamertine prison in Rome is not a house arrest. It is a dungeon. It is a suffocating, subterranean rock tomb, accessed only through a hole in the ceiling. The floor is slick with moisture. The air smells of unwashed bodies and impending executions. Paul sits in the dark, shivering. He asks for a pen. This is not a doctrinal treatise. This is not a church discipline handbook. This is a last will and testament. We call it To Timothy. His friends have abandoned him. Demas has deserted him because he loved this present world. Alexander the coppersmith has done him great harm. Only Luke is with him. He is lonely. He is freezing. And he knows the executioner's sword is already being sharpened. You can hear the tremor in his hand as he writes the words. He does not ask for an escape plan. He asks for his heavy winter cloak, the one he left behind in Troas. Because the damp chill of the cell is unbearable, he asks for the scrolls, especially the parchments. He wants the scriptures to keep him company in the dark. And then he writes the final, breathtaking summary of his life. I am already being poured out as a drink offering, the way the first century experienced them. You have to trace the ink as it dries, tracking this man across the Mediterranean over the span. And the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. The Greek word he uses for departure is the same word sailors used for loosening the moorings of a ship. It is the word a soldier uses when striking a tent to break camp. Paul does not see death as an ending. He sees it as setting sail. He writes to Timothy with the fierce clarity of a dying man. He tells him to preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Endure suffering. Do the work of an evangelist. Fulfill your ministry. He is handing the baton over in the dark. The letter leaves the cell. We don't know if Timothy made it to Rome before winter. We don't know if Paul ever got his heavy coat. We only know that not long after the ink dried on this final piece of papyrus, Paul was led out onto the Ostian Way and beheaded. The voice that shook an empire finally went silent, but the words he bled onto the page were already moving. And if you step back and look at the trajectory of those 13 letters, you see a transformation that no organized table of contents can ever show you, of roughly 15 years. 15 years of riots, betrayals, and sleepless nights. You have to see how the words he uses change as his body breaks down. When you align the 13 scrolls on a wooden table, laying them out from the dusty roads of Galatia to the freezing dark of the Mamertine prison, a different man emerges. You do not see a flawless marble statue of a saint. You see a bleeding, exhausted, relentlessly human pastor. Look at the trajectory of the timeline. He starts with fire. He ends with tears. He begins by screaming at Galatians about legalism. He finishes by begging a young friend for a winter coat. He writes his early letters in the chaotic noise of bustling Greek marketplaces. He dictates his middle letters while pacing in Ephesian workshops. He pens his final letters in the suffocating, unventilated silence of a Roman rock tomb. The gospel he preaches never wavers. But the man holding the pen softens. The early Paul draws hard lines in the sand. He demands absolute order. He calls down apostolic curses on false teachers. He dictates at a furious, breathless pace, his scribes struggling to capture his rushing Greek arguments. But watch the timeline shift. In the early years, he expects the sky to split open tomorrow. He tells the Thessalonians to wait. He tells the Corinthians the time is short. But as the decades grind on, the horizon expands. The timeline stretches out. He realizes he is not just preparing a bride for an immediate wedding. You have to start at the very beginning. Before the polished theology, before the deep cosmic reflections, the place to start is roughly the year 49 AD. He is building a temple meant to survive a multi-generational war. So the later Paul writes about grace. He writes about the cosmic supremacy of Jesus in Colossians. He forgives a runaway slave named Onesimus. He reflects on his own glaring weaknesses. He writes about his scars, his shipwrecks, and his inescapable thorn in the flesh. These 13 letters are not a sanitized theological textbook. They are a living, breathing organism. You watch the ink mature. You trace a 15-year evolution where the aggression of a rigid Pharisee is slowly ground down into the fierce patience of a spiritual father. You smell the salt air of Mediterranean shipwrecks. You feel the sharp bite of the Roman whip. You hear the scrape of heavy iron chains dragging across the floorboards of a house arrest. He realizes that planting a church requires more than flawless doctrine. It requires blood. It requires sweat. It requires the willingness to be chained to a wall so someone else can walk free. Every letter was a rescue mission. Every chapter was a crisis averted. But there is one final pattern hiding in the ink of these 13 scrolls. And when you pull back to look at the entire landscape of his life, you realize exactly what this prisoner left behind in the dusty, pagan province of Galatia. And the man holding the pen is not offering a polite greeting. He is absolutely furious. A furious letter tore through Galatia, and the foundation of grace held firm. A grieving church stared at the sky, and their feet were anchored back to the earth. A fractured community shattered into factions, and they were shown the scandalous wisdom of a bloody cross. A masterpiece crossed the sea in the hands of a woman, and the intellectual cathedral of the faith was built. A runaway slave walked back to his master, and the hierarchy of an empire was quietly dismantled. A chained man looked past his Roman guard, and the dimensions of a cosmic temple were revealed. A freezing prisoner begged for his winter coat, and the baton of leadership was passed in the dark. 13 letters, 15 years, one unbroken story. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the heavy winter cloak he left in Troas. When you read his letters out of order, he feels like a towering marble statue, a perfect theologian, dropping flawless doctrine from the sky. But when you read them on the actual timeline of his life, the marble shatters. He didn't know his words would be bound in leather and placed on church altars for 2,000 years. He only knew he was lonely. The damp chill of the subterranean cell, he rubs his eyes, shifting his weight against a back heavily scarred by Roman whips, and begins to dictate to a scribe. The first surviving letter Paul writes is Galatians, penned around 49 AD, and he is breathing fire. He skips the pleasantries, was unbearable, and he needed the scriptures to keep him company before the sword fell. If you are in a season where your life feels like a series of frantic crisis interventions, the timeline gives you permission to be human. If you are exhausted, if you feel chained to circumstances you cannot escape, if your spiritual efforts seem to result only in shipwrecks and cold rooms, look at the man holding the pen. The theology that changed the world was not forged in a quiet, peaceful sanctuary. It was hammered out in the chaos. The letters are proof that God does not need pristine conditions to write a masterpiece with your life. He uses the panic, he uses the tears, and he used the chains. If this timeline reached something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like their current struggle has disqualified them from being used by God. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who weaves our shipwrecks, our chains, and our freezing nights into his grand cosmic temple walk with you through your own dark season and bring you out carrying a truth you could not have learned any other way. He drops the customary Roman greetings. He goes straight to war. You can almost see the ink flying across the page, the reed pen pressing hard enough to tear the fragile papyrus. A group of teachers has infiltrated the young churches in Galatia. They are telling non-Jewish converts they must be circumcised. They are demanding adherence to ancient dietary laws. They are saying grace is a good start, but now you must earn your seat at the table. Galatians is not a polite theological debate. It is a frantic rescue mission. Paul knows that if they add a single human requirement to the cross, the entire structure collapses. So he dismantles their legalism by pointing to the exact moment history shifted. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, he writes, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son." The word Paul uses for time here is the Greek kairos. We have one general word for time in English. The ancient Greeks had two. Chronos is clock time. It is the steady, chronological ticking of seconds, days, and years. But kairos is entirely different. It means the supreme moment, the window of opportunity. He is not writing a book. He is not composing theology for a seminary library. He is writing a letter to people he loves. The critical, pregnant threshold where heaven intersects earth. It is the exact same word Jesus uses in Mark 1:15 when he announces, "The time is fulfilled." That root changes everything. When Paul looks back at the incarnation, he does not see a random date plucked from the sky. He sees the kairos. He sees the perfect, orchestrated alignment of Roman roads, a unified Greek language, and desperate Jewish prophecy. The fullness of time is not a date on a calendar. It is a cosmic ambush. Fast forward just a few months to the early 50s AD. Paul writes 1 and 2 Thessalonians. The tone shifts dramatically. The fire of Galatians cools into the protective anxiety of a parent. The crisis here is not legalism. It is panic. The Thessalonians are grieving. People in their community are dying. And Jesus has not returned yet. Someone has even forged a letter, claiming the day of the Lord has already happened, leaving them all behind in the dark. Panic breeds chaos. Believers are quitting their jobs. They are abandoning their daily routines. They are simply staring at the sky, waiting for an escape pod. Paul writes to anchor their feet back to the dirt. He tells them to work with their hands. He tells them to live quietly. People who are confused, people who are fighting, people who are drifting. The parchment is rough. The ink is made of soot and tree gum. He reminds them that the timeline is secure, and their job is to occupy the space they are in. These first 3 volleys establish his baseline. Grace cannot be earned, and the future cannot be rushed. But the letters are about to change, because Paul is about to learn that bad theology is relatively easy to correct on paper. It is human behavior that will break a pastor's heart. Paul paces the rough stone floor of a workshop in Ephesus, his hands permanently stained with the dark, heavy dye of tent-making leather. A courier from the household of Chloe has just arrived, covered in the dust of a long sea journey, and the report he carries is devastating. The church in Corinth is tearing itself apart. Corinth is not a quiet religious enclave. It is a booming, chaotic Roman colony, a bustling port city choking on the smell of salt water, raw sewage, and incense from 1,000 pagan shrines. It is a city obsessed with upward mobility, sexual freedom, and intellectual superiority. And the new believers living there have allowed the culture to completely colonize their imagination. They are suing each other in public Roman courts. They are patronizing temple prostitutes and excusing it as spiritual liberty. They are getting drunk on the communion wine, while the poor members of the church are left to starve in the corners of the room. When he finishes speaking, someone will roll up this fragile piece of papyrus, tuck it inside their cloak, and walk hundreds of miles across bandit-infested Roman roads. They have factionalized, wearing the names of different apostles, like rival political jerseys. Paul sits down to write what we now call 1 Corinthians, because he is speaking into a culture obsessed with status. He does not try to win a polished intellectual debate. He drops a bomb right in the middle of their arrogance by pointing to the cross. He reminds them that the instrument of Roman execution, a blood-soaked piece of wood designed to humiliate enemies of the state, is actually the profound wisdom of God. 1 Corinthians is not a list of moral regulations. It is a desperate attempt to show a splintering community what love actually looks like in public. But the letter does not immediately fix the problem. A year later, the situation deteriorates so badly that Paul has to write again. This time pouring out a document so raw, so emotionally volatile, that you can practically feel his pulse racing through the text. We call it 2 Corinthians. So-called super-apostles have invaded the city, mocking Paul's physical appearance, criticizing his speaking ability, and questioning his authority. He responds by doing something no self-respecting Roman orator would ever do. He boasts about his suffering. He lists the shipwrecks, the beatings, the cold nights in the open sea, the times he went hungry, just to read it out loud to a room full of terrified peasants. You probably have a Bible with his name scattered across the table of contents. He talks about a mysterious thorn in his flesh, a physical agony that God refuses to remove. He shows them his scars, proving that true spiritual authority is always forged in weakness, never in dominance. The crisis in Corinth eventually settles into an uneasy peace. Paul finally travels there in person, spending the winter of 57 AD in the very city that has caused him so much grief. And as he sits in Corinth, watching the winter rain lash against the stone streets, he picks up his pen again. This time, he is not putting out fires. He is looking west, toward an empire's capital, preparing to write a letter to a church he has never even seen. The scroll unrolls flat on a sturdy wooden table, the ink dark and deliberate, untouched by the panic of Galatia or the tears of Corinth. For the first time in his ministry, Paul has the luxury of space. He is writing to Rome. He did not plant this church, and he has never walked its streets. He is writing to a community fractured along deep ethnic fault lines, where Jewish believers returning from imperial exile have found Gentile converts occupying their seats. We often read Romans as a theological dictionary. We parse its Greek verbs in quiet seminary classrooms. 13 letters. Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, all the way down to a tiny postcard called Philemon. Most people assume the order of these letters is chronological. We dissect it for doctrines of justification and atonement. But Romans is not a dry theological textbook. It is a peace treaty written in blood. Paul is building an intellectual cathedral, brick by brick, proving that every human being is equally bankrupt and equally beloved. He traces the fracture of humanity all the way back to Eden, showing how a disease infected the entire bloodstream of the world. He proves the law was only a mirror, designed to show us the dirt on our faces, not a cloth to wash us clean. He writes about a creation groaning for redemption. He writes about an adoption that renames the orphan. He writes about a love that neither height, nor depth, nor angels, nor demons can sever. If realizing the sheer humanity behind these texts is changing how you read your Bible, you're exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe and drop a thought in the comments. Because every week, we go deeper into the historical grain of Scripture than you knew was possible. So Paul seals the scroll with hot wax and places it into the hands of a businesswoman named Phoebe, trusting her to carry his masterpiece across the sea to the capital of the world. The righteousness of God, he tells them, is not a standard that condemns you, a carefully planned progression of Christian thought. They assume Paul started with his masterpiece in Romans and worked his way down to the personal stuff. It is a power that rescues you. Romans represents the absolute peak of his theological clarity. The argument is flawless. His plans to travel west to Spain are clearly mapped out. But the man who watches Phoebe walk away with this letter does not know what is waiting for him in Jerusalem. The season of open roads is over, and the next time he asks for a pen, his wrists will be weighed down by Roman iron. Paul sits under house arrest. The heavy iron chain scrapes against the wooden floorboards when he shifts his weight. The air inside the room is thick with Roman summer heat. A young man stands in the corner, terrified, watching the apostle write. His name is Onesimus. He is a runaway slave. Under Roman law, his life is forfeit. He has stolen from his master. He has fled to the capital. He has collided with a chained prisoner who happens to know the man who owns him. And now, Paul is sending him back. He writes a tiny scroll, just 335 words in the original Greek. We call it Philemon. It fits on a single piece of papyrus. It contains no grand theological treatises. It mentions no cosmic battles. But that is a misconception. The letters in your New Testament are simply arranged by size, longest to shortest. It is an organizational system. It does not try to map out the heavens, but it dismantles an empire. Paul tells Philemon to take Onesimus back, not as property. As a brother, he tells a wealthy Roman citizen to look at a fugitive and see family. He puts his own neck on the line, offering to pay back whatever was stolen. This is not a polite request for clemency. It is a social earthquake. In a world built on the backs of 60 million slaves, Paul takes a sledgehammer to the foundation of human hierarchy. But Onesimus does not travel alone. He carries a second scroll tucked inside his cloak. He travels with a man named Tychicus back to the city of Colossae. And this second letter, Colossians, explains exactly why the social earthquake must happen. The young church in Colossae is drowning in mysticism. False teachers are worshiping angels. They are charting the stars. They are obsessed with secret spiritual hierarchies. They believe Jesus is important, but they think you need other spirit guides to truly reach the divine. Paul cuts through the fog with rapid-fire Greek. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 19, he tells them that in Jesus, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. The word he uses for fullness is the Greek pleroma. It means totality, the complete sum of all divine powers and attributes.